start off by telling you a story. The story is about, so the year is 1995, and I just graduated from university, and my first job was with the circus. I ran away and joined the circus. That's the circus right there. That's a picture. Those are my photos from 1995. The circus was called the Clyde Beatty Cole Brothers Circus, and I spent 6 months on the road working with the circus. I saw the circus 400 times in a row. Every day, twice a day, for 6 months. Really interestingly, I was driving home from New York City. I live in New York. I was driving home. I live in New Jersey, to be fair. Driving home from New York City, and the circus was there. That's my circus. 20 years later, I saw it off the highway, so I took this picture just this weekend. Now, what's really interesting, I spent 6 months traveling with the circus, and you meet a lot of really interesting people when you live with the circus. There's 200 people there, and lots of famous people come by and visit. And so one of the interesting people that I met was Monsieur Steven Tyler. There he is. And in case you're curious, that's me with hair. Next to Mr. Tyler. It's been 20 years. It's a long time to go. But you know, he came to the circus, and that was really interesting. Another interesting person that I met in the circus was the Human Cannonball. This guy. Can't see him. That's him right there at the top. And you sit around, there's a lot of free time in the circus, and so one day I started to wonder, how does one become the Human Cannonball? Right? There's no career path. Right? There's no CV, LinkedIn page for it. Right? And so I asked him, I said, how did you become the Human Cannonball? And he told me this amazing story about how he became the Human Cannonball. And the story starts with, naturally, the previous Human Cannonball. And the story goes like this. I have to explain this to you. So this is the contraption that the Human Cannonball uses every day. It looks like a cannon, but it's just a spring that cocks back. He slides in there, he waves goodbye, the ringmaster hits a button, and it shoots him out, and he lands on the other end in a net. Okay? Now, the way that they know where to put the net is they have a dummy, a mannequin, that weighs the same as the Human Cannonball. And so every time we come to a new place, they set up the tent, they drive the truck into the tent, they aim the cannon, they put the mannequin in the cannon, they shoot it, they see where it lands, and that's where they put up the net. Fair enough. Okay? Now, the previous Human Cannonball, okay? They're driving to the next place to set up the tent one night, and they get there late. And there's no time to set up the cannon. And so they park the truck for the night, they leave the mannequin outside, and it rains. The next day, they do the same thing they've always done. They drive the truck into the tent, they aim it, they put the wet mannequin in the cannon, they shoot it, where it lands, they put up the net. That afternoon, in front of 4,000 children, the previous Human Cannonball gets in the cannon, waves goodbye, they shoot him out, and he flies way past the net. Right? Now, he didn't die. He actually was severely injured, and he's still working in the circus today. But what was interesting was that the Human Cannonball, the previous Human Cannonball, so this guy, so how do we get to this? This guy was the guy who cleaned his pool. So he went back to Florida to recover from his injury, and he saw this blonde-haired, blue-eyed guy cleaning his pool, and he said, wouldn't you like a promotion to go from pool cleaner to Human Cannonball? And sure enough, he took the job, and so now he's the guy who flies out of the cannon. So that's the story about how this guy became the Human Cannonball. But the interesting part is that the previous guy and his team, they had made the same assumptions day in and day out, that everything would be the same and that everything would work the same. And then one day, conditions changed, and those assumptions didn't hold true anymore. And in their case, it met with tragic consequences. Right? Because he missed the net. In our case, we have to think about the same things. The same assumptions that we made yesterday about the way we build and design great software don't work in today's realities. Today's realities have shifted dramatically, and the reason for that is this. It's what Mark Andreessen said in 2011. He said, software is eating the world. Everything is becoming software. Any business of scale or any business that desires to scale is a software-driven business. And the assumptions we've made about the way that we make products, the way that we build products in the past, don't make sense in this new reality where software is eating the world. And you see this from leaders across all kinds of corporations. This is one of the senior tech leaders at Ford, and he talks about how there's an opportunity to look at software playing a role in shaping the automotive experiences of tomorrow. And we're seeing this happen with companies like Tesla, which a lot of the US car manufacturers and car sellers are trying to litigate out of business. It's really fascinating to watch. Same thing with Federal Express. This is the senior VP of IT at Federal Express. He says, I run a software company inside of FedEx. Everything is driven by software. It's the way that we run our business. We don't think of FedEx or Ford as software companies, but that's what they are at the core. We've seen this before, right? Software comes along, and the incumbent players refuse to see it as a threat initially, and they try to litigate it out of business. This is the Recording Industry Association of America that desperately tried to litigate Napster out of business, and they succeeded with the help of this guy. This is Lars Ulrich. He plays drums for Metallica, right? 12 years after Napster declared bankruptcy, you can get Metallica's music on Spotify, right? Same thing with this company. They came along, and nobody said, this is never going to change the way that we produce, distribute, consume video and media. And I challenge you in the United States to find a Blockbuster that's still in business. Right? Software-driven businesses are radically changing the way that we make our products and services, and we have to adapt. Now look, this is how we used to build products, the assembly line. And when everything is known in a system, when you know exactly what's going in, exactly what's coming out, and exactly how it's going to be used, this makes sense, this assembly line model. You can optimize it, you can build a culture around it, and you can squeeze every last ounce of productivity and efficiency and great design out of it. And so what we did was we took this and we applied it to software. We translated it directly into software. We took that assembly line model and made this waterfall model, right? Where someone defines it and someone develops it, and someone designs it, someone develops it, someone tests it, and then we deploy it, or some variation of that. And the work moves from silo to silo to silo, with each discipline applying its coat of paint to the product itself. But in reality, in today's reality, software is different. And here's why. Software is continuous these days. It's never finished. There is no end product. It's just an ongoing optimization, iteration of the products and the software and the services that we deliver. And so the designs are never finished. And there is no final design. And we can continue to deliver software in this fashion that allows us to build a conversation with our audience that was never possible before. The sooner we can get product into people's hands, the sooner we can get a sense of if what we're building actually makes sense for them. And if it doesn't, we can adjust. And the shorter that we can get that loop, the more accurate our designs can be, and the better products and services that we can design. Now, I want to put a fine note on this, okay? This is how often Amazon pushes code to production. Amazon.com pushes code, live code, to real people every 11.6 seconds. That's incredible. That's amazing. And what that allows them to do is to have this ongoing conversation with their millions of users, this sensing layer, to get a sense of, is this the right thing to do? Is this the right thing to do? Is this the right thing to do? And because there's such small increments, the size of the cost of being wrong here is tiny. If you get this wrong, you roll it back. If you get it right, you increase the scope of who gets to see it, and then a little bit more, and a little bit more, and you get it better and better designed and a better workflow. Right? And yet, most of the companies that I deal with, most of the companies that I work with, still think like this. They still think about model years. How many new features can we cram into the next release before we can market it or charge more money for it or or call it something new? Right? As if there's a fixed product that we launch with this knowledge work that Jabe was talking about, and that can't be changed anymore. Now look, this was our reality, okay? I don't know if you guys got these here in France, but in the US, these came twice a week, and I was partially responsible, and I'm sorry if you got these. I worked at AOL 12 years ago, and we worked on the software that went out on these CDs that everybody got so often. Our feedback cycle was 12 months because it took us 6 months to get one of these out. We worked for 6 months to make it perfect, to create the Gold Master, the GM copy. The Gold Master is the disk from which all the other disks are copied. And then this would go out, and people would consume this, right? They'd install it. Eventually, they would use it. We would collect feedback for 6 months, and then we'd have another 6 months to build and get it perfect, and another year before an iteration of the software went out. That was a 12-month feedback loop. But in a continuous world, we can get feedback in 11.5 seconds all of a sudden. Right? And because of that, these industrial-era assembly line management tactics don't work in this new reality. The assumptions that we made about the way that we build products don't work in today's realities. And so as leaders of software companies, as makers of products, as designers, we have to ask ourselves a few questions. The first is this: what does this continuous world mean for our business? If we can have this ongoing conversation with our customers, with our users, how does that change the way that we interact with them and the way that we build products and services for them? The second question is, how can we take advantage of all this new information? If you're having this conversation on a regular basis with your audience, with your users, you are getting an amazing amount of information coming back at you. How do you take advantage of that? Qualitative information, quantitative information. How do we use that? And then finally, and I think most importantly, is how can we maximize the creativity and the learning and ultimately the productivity of our teams in order to take advantage of all of this new insight, to build the best products, to design the best services for our audience? And the answer is this: in order to survive in this new reality, you have to design a culture of innovation. And I think Jabe was starting to talk about that, designing the system. You have to design this culture of innovation. And this culture of innovation is a culture of experimentation. It's a culture that encourages learning. Dave Gray wrote a book called The Connected Company. If you haven't read it, I highly suggest that you do. And in that book, Dave discusses the difference between deliberate strategy and emergent strategy. He talks about deliberate strategy as the C-suite's vision for what the company should build. Right? Executives know how to be creative. Executives know the answer. They deliver that to the teams, and the teams go forth and execute. And perhaps that was the way to build products when you knew exactly how the product was going to be used at the end, like a car. But in software, it's different. In software, we have to employ emergent strategy. Emergent strategy is organic, and it lets companies learn and continually develop new strategies by encouraging a culture of hypothesis and experimentation. And it's bottom up, it's driven from the teams. And you have to give the teams enough autonomy to do their regular work and to run these experiments every 11.5 seconds to try a new design, to try a new approach, to try a different way of communicating with our audience to get them to change their behavior in a way that's beneficial to them as well as to us as a business. And you hear this again from leaders across the board. This is Jeff Bezos from Amazon, right? You need to set up and organize so that you can do as many experiments per unit of time as possible. You hear this from Eric Schmidt. He calls them at-bats. It's a baseball metaphor. You hear this from Jack Welch as well. All these leaders say, because you've got all this new information, how many times can you take a swing at the same problem? Now, here's something that's really interesting, and something that's been overlooked, I think, lately, is this. Design, great design, is the differentiation in today's software-driven products and services. And this is because the cost and the effort of creating, deploying, and maintaining great software has come down significantly. And so design has emerged as the differentiating factor for the success of products or services. And design is an umbrella term for the entire experience of using a product. So it doesn't mean to belittle software engineering, right? Excellent software engineering is still necessary, but the cost of that has come down significantly. Turns out that design is iterative. It's always been iterative. We try something, we see how people react, and then we iterate on that design. Design is experimentation. It's the way that we learn whether this is the right thing to build, and if it's the right thing to build, did we deploy it appropriately? Does it work the way people expect? Does it get them to do the things that we want them to do? And so the question is, how do we structure a culture to support iterative design, design experimentation, learning in a continuous environment? At the core of a culture of innovation is the team. That's the atomic unit of innovation. And if you've not, this is Cool Runnings. If you haven't seen this movie, highly recommended. Highly recommended. The atomic unit of a culture of innovation is the team. We have to put great teams together. And so the question then becomes, how do we design an innovative team? What are the components that make up an innovative team? And there are three that we're going to go through. The first is this, the anatomy of the team. Who's on the team? Right? What do we need on there? The second is, how do we task the team? How do we tell the team what to do? And then finally, how should the team work? What's the right process to create great design, great user experience? Right? Is it Agile? Is it Lean? Agilefall? Scrum? Scrumban? All the different combinations. Let's start with the anatomy of the team. What's the makeup of a great innovative team that delivers great design? Let's start first with a set of anti-patterns. Anti-patterns are the way not to design an innovative team. Okay? First is siloed. Okay? Separating your team into discipline-specific silos with designers over here and engineers over here, QA over there, and marketing in a different place. It fails. The teams fail because you isolate your team members. You diminish communication between them, and when there's less communication, teams rely more on written communication. Written communication takes time to create, to read, to digest, and to react to, slowing down the team's efficiency and productivity. And remember, in this continuous world, the faster you get something into your customers' hands, the faster you can get some kind of feedback about whether this is the right way to do it or the wrong way to do it. Siloed teams feel like service providers. There's no product ownership, right? We just do the one thing that we've been told we have to do. We write the requirements, or we put the pixels in the right place, or we make the ones and zeros do the things that we need them to do, right? There's no holistic product ownership. We don't feel like strategic partners. And because of that, we don't have a view of the entire thing, of the whole. Right? Many siloed teams don't have a clear sense of who they're building the product for. There's no empathy for the user. Right? What pain point are we trying to solve for them? How do we know we're building the right stuff? This is all missing from siloed teams. And so everybody's making what I call keyhole decisions. They're looking through a keyhole to understand, to do their work without a clear understanding of the project, the program, or the corporate vision for the thing that they're working on. And then finally, these siloed teams don't collaborate. A lack of collaboration means the synthesis of ideas coming together doesn't happen. And so we're relying on singular heroes in these disciplines to do tremendous work instead of having them work together. Now, I know this from experience because when I built a user experience and design team at a company called The Ladders in New York, I did this exact same thing. I built a silo right in the center of that company. That was my job. That was us in the center, with engineering and product management and marketing in different places. And when people needed design work done, they came to me and they asked me, hey, we need some design work. Who's available? And I said, well, Bob's available. And then another team would come and they'd say, who's available? And I'd say, oh, Bob's available, let's give him some more. Third team would come and say, hey, Bob's available. Give him some more work, right? And what happened was, I was in the center of this. I became the bottleneck. Right? The traffic cop, directing traffic between all of these different people. And when you assign work, when you assign 3 teams worth of work to one individual, what that person has to do is come into work every day and decide which 2 people they're going to piss off that day. Right? There's only one project they can work on. So they do just enough work to get that done and move on to the second one and the third one and so forth. So they're doing surface level work without a clear understanding and without a real relationship with the teams they're working with. And so the question then becomes, what team structure facilitates a culture of innovation? Great design, great services. And there's 4 qualities to this. The first is this: the team must be small, like this kitten. This is a small kitten. Small teams, Jabe touched on this, 6 to 8 people, what Jeff Bezos called the 2 pizza teams. Right? And those are 2 American pizzas, it's worth mentioning. If you can't feed your team with 2 American pizzas, it's too big. Small teams are great for communication. They're great for management. You know who everybody is and what they're responsible for. And most importantly, they're great for accountability. There's nowhere to hide. If you're the designer on a small team and you're not doing your work, everybody knows it. Same for engineering, same for product management. Small teams work really well. You take those small teams and you put them together in the same place, co-located. Not just in the same building or in the same campus, together, sitting next to each other every day. Now, I know in reality, many of us work in large companies with distributed offices. I work in that situation as well. And so if you're going to try to build this kind of culture with distributed teams, there's one rule you have to follow if you're not going to be co-located. And that rule is you have to be awake at the same time. It sounds simple, but there has to be some overlap during the day that allows you to do things together through video conference, through conference calls, and through other tools. If you're not awake at the same time, everybody separates into their silos and resorts back to written communication. Small, co-located, dedicated. Everybody is working on one project, and it's this project, the same one. Right? No one's being siphoned off to go fix bugs over here or to pretty up a presentation for the CEO. Right? Everybody's working on this project right now. Because if you lose people on a small team, the rest of the team is waiting for them to do their job. So you're slowing them down. And there's context switching. And there's a cost to that, switching between that. That, again, slows the team's efficiency down. And they cannot react to the information that this continuous world reality is bringing into the team. The final qualities, we've got small, dedicated, co-located, and self-sufficient. Self-sufficient means the team can do anything that it needs to do. The competencies for the team to do its work are available on that team. If the team needs to design something, there is someone on the team who can design. If the team needs to write code, there's someone on the team who can write code. Research, someone can do research. QA, marketing, whatever it is, the team can make the work happen. And when that feedback comes in from that feedback loop, the team is empowered to make a decision about how to react to that. Because remember, the risks are small. They're not working for 6 months or a year and launching something. They're working for a day, a week, a month, and then learning and coming back together. Small, co-located, dedicated, self-sufficient. The 4 qualities of an innovative team. Okay. So the next question becomes, how do we tell the team what to do? This is one strategy, right? You should yell at them for a while. And that works for some bosses, right? But let's talk again, let's start again with anti-patterns about how not to tell the team what to do. Here's my favorite anti-pattern in tasking teams right here. The roadmap, right? Roadmaps are fantastic, right? They tell a compelling story. We're here, and we're going over here. And there are 6 steps in between. And we know exactly how long they're going to take between now and then. Right? It's easy to see delays, it's easy to see next steps, and it lays out a clear vision. What it also lays out is a fixed scope and fixed time for that engagement. And I don't know about you, but in the 15 years that I've been building software products, when you fix scope and you fix time, one of 3 things happens. Right? You move the deadline, you reduce scope, or you burn your people out with 80-hour weeks in the last 3 weeks of the project. Crunch mode. You guys have crunch mode? Right. In reality, this is what roadmaps really look like. Because software is unknown, there's this unknown nature to software because it's this continuous, never-ending road, right? We could be building something that we think is easy, and it turns out to be complex. We could have gone through this entire design cycle only to find out that our customers can't use it. Maybe we're working on a feature, and our competitor launches the same thing, but they do a better job at it. Right? It's cleaner, it's easier to use, people love it. What do? We're not on market yet. Right? The reality is we have to adjust as we move through here. And that's why I love this quote from last year from Kent Beck, who's one of the guys who wrote the Agile Manifesto. And he said product roadmaps should be lists of questions, not lists of features. We should be asking our teams to answer questions. Right? Should we be building this? Should we design it this way? Should it be red? Should it be blue? Right? Because what happens is that when we have these feature-based roadmaps that say we're going to build these 12 things in the next year, we incentivize our teams to create output. Feature after feature that create bloated products that nobody can use. Right? This is the Microsoft Word version of a guitar. Okay? 95% of the features on this guitar are useless to 99% of the people in the world. There's one person in the world who can use everything on this guitar, and that's Pat Metheny, whom this guitar was designed for. Right? The rest of us who know something about guitar use this part of it. That's it. Right? But we incentivize our teams to launch features instead of giving them the opportunity to find out if they should be building this and should it be designed this way. They just push features out, and our products start to look like this, bloated and unusable. And the reality is that features on their own are not a measure of success. Right? We have 30 years of jokes because of this features. Right? 30 years. The next anti-pattern that I love is the annual planning process. Large corporations lock down next year's budget today. They assume they know exactly what's going to happen in the future, and so this is how much money we're going to allocate, how many people, this is how much design it'll take, this is how much engineering it will take. We know exactly what's going to happen. Can you imagine locking, if you're in any kind of a software-driven business, can you imagine locking down your IT budget for 2006 and 2005? Right? You guys remember the year this came out? Right? That changed everything. Let me share with you a story. This was not my boss, but my boss looked a lot like this at a company that I worked with in New York. It was The Ladders, in fact. It was a job board. And it was a job board that had the ecosystem everybody paid to play. So job seekers paid money to read job listings and apply to jobs, and employers paid money to post jobs. The CEO of the company noticed that our numbers had flatlined. Retention was flatlined, renewals were flatlined, revenue, everything was flat, and that's not good. And so he did what he had always done. He retreated back and created his deliberate strategy, and he came down to where we worked, and he said, stop everything, I know what we're going to do and how we're going to fix this. And what he decided to do was he wanted to provide every paying job seeker a job search assistant. It's a person, a real person in New York, from whom all communications would come from the company. Phone calls, emails, job search advice, the whole thing. And so we stopped, and we took 50 people in 9 months worth of time, and we turned everybody 90 degrees and said, go build this. And this forced us to redesign everything, the website, the marketing, all the acquisition flows, all the workflows, the revenue model, phone systems, scripts. We had to hire people, we had to train them, we had to build in all this logic. You know, what if somebody was sick that day and couldn't answer their phone calls or couldn't return their emails? All of this work, 9 months worth of work, 50 people's worth of time. And 6 months after we launched it, we shut it down. We shut it down because it didn't move anything in the right direction. And the question that we never asked was there an opportunity for us to learn this before we expended all these resources? We made all these assumptions that things would work this way. For example, one assumption that we made was that men 55 years old who made about $200,000 a year that was our target audience, who had 25 years of work experience, would take job search advice from a 22-year-old college graduate. Right? That's a huge assumption. We could have designed so many tests and experiments to find that out in advance before doing this, right? Only to learn. We could have just simply taken 100 people and given them the service without changing a thing to see if they would renew, if they would tell their friends, that they would spend more money, right? There's so many opportunities to do this before expending these efforts. And so instead, what we want to do is we want to task our teams to achieve business outcomes, not give them all these features to implement, but tell them what metrics we'd like them to move. And we get granular with those metrics, right? We don't want to talk about revenue or customer satisfaction. We want to talk about login success rate, shopping cart abandonment rates, application completion rates. Get teams to solve those tactical problems where they can see that the work that they did changed customer behavior. And that change in customer behavior is measurable. That's an objective measure of success. So we don't have to base our decisions of success on subjectivity, right? What you're doing is you're giving teams a problem to solve, not a solution to implement. And that gets them excited, and that gets them fired up, and it gets them passionate because it lets them decide whether they can design a solution that's great and makes a lot of sense, or whether they can design a ridiculous solution that doesn't make any sense. Right? They can figure it out based on objective success metrics. And because we talked about planning, I just want to touch on how you would fund something like this very quickly. Right? We've got the small team, and they're trying to figure out how to move this metric, and they're finding features, and they're experimenting. They're running these tiny experiments with different designs and different approaches and different workflows and so forth. And what we do is we fund them incrementally. We build a structure around them that says, your job is to increase retention rate by 25%. We're going to give you 12 weeks. Let us know where you are at 12 weeks. At 12 weeks, the team comes up and says, we've moved retention rate by 12%. We've learned all of these things. And this is where we would go next if you were to fund us for another 12 weeks. And the organization can say, terrific. Here's another 12 weeks. Or maybe the team gets to 25% in 12 weeks and doesn't need a year's worth of funding. Or maybe the team decides that's the wrong metric for us to focus on. That's all great learning that mitigates the risk of the money that we plan in the future. Right? And when you give teams this problem to solve, what you're doing is you're giving them a cause, a mission, something to get passionate about. This is from Elon Musk's conference call last week. Right? Putting in long hours to build somebody else's vision, it's hard. Putting in long hours for a cause, for something that I'm working on, that's easy. The last thing I want to talk about is how should these teams work. We talked about who should be on the team to create great designs, right? We talked about how we let the teams work to create these great experiences, right? Or how we tell the team what to do. How should the team work? What process should they use? How do you integrate design, business, engineering, all of these things? And once again, we're going to start with Antipatterns. First of all, a lack of cross-functional collaboration kills great customer experience. These three pictures are from the circus. I just wanted to remind you that I was in the circus one more time. These were the elephant people. These were three women who walked on giant white balls up ramps. That's what they did. And this is Charlie. He served your meals 3 times a day, should you choose to eat it. There was no cross-functional collaboration of any kind in the circus. It was even down to the clowns, there were silos within the clowns. They fought all the time, all those happy clowns fighting. Can you imagine if the Human Cannonball and the tiger trainer collaborated? I mean, the guy's already flying across the tent. What's the difference if there are 10 tigers underneath him? Right? That never happened, but the excitement factor would have been explosive. But that never happened. Without cross-functional collaboration, teams can't grow, they can't learn from each other, and you can't create something bigger than the sum of its parts. Okay? All too often, we put people in boxes. We tell them what they can and can't do. We limit their creativity, and we limit their contribution because it says designer on their business card, or engineer, or product manager. Right? Well, you're the designer. You can't write code. You're the engineer. You can't design. Right? But we limit them, the contributions that people can do. People can do multiple things. They have multiple competencies. Let them contribute in ways that they can. And I'd love to share this story as an example of that. Does anybody in the audience know who this is? Just call it out if you know it. It's me, somebody said? No, it's not me. It's good though. I think this picture was taken before I was born. No, okay, I'll tell you who this is. This is a guy named Jeff Baxter. They call him Skunk Baxter. He's a founding member of Steely Dan, and he was in the Doobie Brothers. Okay, he's a legendary American rock guitarist. Anybody know what he does today? No? Let me share with you what he does today. Oops. This is what Mr. Baxter does today. I'll let you read it for a second. Skunk Baxter is a consultant to the US government on missile defense. That is what he does today. Now, if he was to approach any government and say, I am a rock and roll guitarist from the 70s, and I want to advise you on missile defense, they would tell him to piss off pretty quickly, right? But it turns out that he has multiple competencies. And in his spare time, which he has a lot of, he has become quite an expert on missile defense. And so by allowing him, by looking past his business card, we're allowing him to contribute in multiple ways. We should do the same for our teams. Another anti-pattern is this fear of failure. Most company culture dictates that you must succeed, but rarely do we consider the scope of the failure. I don't even use the word failure anymore with my clients. I use the word learn. Learn fast, learn often. The only way we can learn is if we fail. I used to have a boss at a company that I worked at in Portland, Oregon. He was the VP of engineering, and he would walk up and down the cubes threatening to fire the engineers. That was his motivation strategy. What are you doing? I'm working on this project. Hurry up or you're fired. Right? What are you doing? I'm going to finish up this code. Hurry up or you're fired. Every day, that was his strategy. People did the least amount of work possible just so they wouldn't get fired until they could finish the interview process at the next company. Right? To move on. Deadlines. Deadlines are a motivational tool and are often arbitrary. Right? Fixed time, fixed scope. Right? If you're going to give a team a deadline, let them do the best job they can in that deadline, but don't crush them to get to the end. Right? All of this builds a culture that lacks ownership of the actual work that we're doing. Right? We don't let people collaborate. We don't let them contribute in every way that we can. We drive them towards arbitrary deadlines, and we tell them that if they get it wrong, they're going to get fired. Right? So everybody does the minimum amount of work. Right? I had a client last summer who asked me to do a heuristic evaluation of 5 of their products, and they allocated 1 week per product. It was a B2B client. For one of those products, it took them 4 days out of the 5 that we had allocated for the project to get me the credentials to access the product. Because no one wanted to give it to me. No one wanted to be the person who gave the consultant access to the program. Right? It's this culture of CYA, this cover your ass culture. Right? People are afraid to do anything. Right? And they're afraid to take risks. And if you don't take risks, you'll never create great products. You'll never create great designs. Right? So then how does a culture of innovation change the way that a team works? First and foremost, the team takes smaller risks. Right? 2 principles come out of lean thinking that are super important. One is that we're always moving from doubt to certainty. The future is unclear. And this continuous process drives us towards that future by taking small steps. Right? We run these experiments. We deploy software every 11.5 seconds. We talk to customers on a regular basis. We ask them questions. We run design experiments. We make the cupcake before we make the cake. The next thing we do is we give teams clear definitions of success, not subjective definitions. Oh, I like it, or I don't like it. Oh, it's pretty. Right? Objective measures of success. How did we successfully change customer behavior? Do they buy more stuff? Do they tell their friends? Right? We let everyone on the team provide whatever competencies they have to the product development process. We don't think about roles. We don't think about business cards. We think about what everyone can contribute. Because that cross-functional collaboration drives great product design. And most importantly, we let teams self-organize. You can give them a structure. You can tell them, okay, you know what, we're going to work in short cycles so that you can learn quickly, so that you can ask questions every so often. But beyond that, let them figure out what the best approach is to doing this work. This is a quote from Jeff Nicholson, who invented the Post-it note. And he said as soon as 3M saw it, they wanted to put Six Sigma right on top of that thing. And he said, listen, we don't know if this is a good idea or a bad idea, if people will like it. Right? Six Sigma is designed to optimize manufacturing and production. Let us figure out if this is a good idea first before we invest in this. Right? Take small risks, make sure it's great product design, and then scale it out. So look, all of these things that I've talked to you about, they're hard. It's organizational change, it's process change, and it's culture change. Right? Process is a reflection of your culture. Why should you design this culture of innovation? 3 reasons. First and foremost, you're going to make customers happy because you will be designing great customer experiences. Products they can use, products they love, products they tell their friends about, and so they'll buy more and more of your products and services. Second, you're reducing waste in your organization by building these successful products. You're not spending time working on efforts that don't solve any real business problems. And your people are engaged in solving those meaningful problems, which leads to an increase in employee morale. Your designers will love working there. Your engineers will love working there. They'll tell their friends. They'll feel like they're part of a mission. They'll be loyal, and they'll tell their friends to come work there as well. Ultimately, this boils down to one thing. You have to transform your company from a culture of delivery, focused on features, to a culture of learning. Thank you very much.
Alors, toujours quelques minutes.
Again, we have a few minutes for questions.
Hello, thank you for presentation. I have the question. Let's imagine we've done all these things that you just said now, and we are getting bigger, and there are more people coming to the team. And how you manage this scaling process in terms of co-location and in terms of small teams?
It's a great question. I think that's the big question these days, and I think people are looking for that answer. I think you're seeing traction in some methodologies like SAFe, for example, the Scaled Agile framework. I actually don't believe that that's the best way to do this. I think that the context and the culture and the politics of your organization will determine how to scale this. But ultimately, if there's a way for you to maintain these small cross-functional teams, that's the goal. Now, I've seen companies, for example, and it's not without its flaws nor its challenges, but the model that Spotify uses is really interesting, where they essentially have this these small cross-functional teams that report up into a product line or a segment of the product line, and then they have a matrix across those teams where designers have a place to go home. There's a design team that they can go and have conversations with, and engineers report to engineers. And so there's coordination at the product line level, and there's coordination at the discipline level that allows for professional development, but also for great product development. But day to day, those teams sit together, work together on the same things, those cross-functional teams. So I've seen that model work well, but I don't have the silver bullet for scaling. What else? There we go.
Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
I've also read your book. It's awesome.
Thank you.
There's just one slight point that I disagree with you, which is the idea that software engineering tasks became cheaper. Don't you think that the focus on UX and design is more a way to achieve a competitive advantage, because there's no shortage of software on any category? Truth is that you need to outperform your competitor, and design and usability is the way.
So perhaps I misspoke, and I certainly don't, again, I don't mean to demean software engineering. Some of my best friends are software engineers, right? No, but what I meant to say is that the cost of running these experiments, the way to run this iterative product design experimentation process has plummeted, right? In the past, you had to write software to test these things or deploy costly frameworks in order to see whether things could work in certain situations. And I think that cost has come down. And so the ability for us to learn has become significantly cheaper. But I agree with you that that great software engineering can't be minimized, and certainly is not necessarily cheaper. But because everyone has software, every company has an app, every company has a website or some kind of a web portal, it's experience that helps people choose whether or not to go somewhere. But it's interesting, it's not just limited to design, right? It ends up being the entire customer experience. So you could design the most fantastic checkout process for your e-commerce site. But if I come that day and you don't have the product that I want in the color and size that I want, I'm not going to buy from you. And I may not come back. And that's not design's fault. That's merchandising or purchasing's fault, right? And so it has to be this holistic view of the user experience and the design. There's kind of a growing conversation in the UX community. It's not mainstream yet because the UX community continues to struggle to define itself year after year. But there's a growing conversation around whether there should even be an explicit title of user experience designer, or should user experience be everybody's responsibility? And there still be designers, interaction designers, visual designers, but user experience or customer experience is everybody's responsibility.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jeff. Thank you.
Thank you.